welcome to the session on how to unleash the power of teams through systemic team coaching with Stefano Petti. Stefano, in 2004, took a very difficult decision. He felt stuck in a system that made him feel powerless and disengaged, a system, however, that he couldn't change from within. So he decided to quit a promising career in finance, and fast forward 18 years, today he is a partner at Asterys and supports organizations and teams from the outside in to transform into healthier and more high-performing systems. Stefano's today's session intends to shed some light around systemic team coaching and how this fast-growing practice can ignite a transformative experience to accelerate team effectiveness and performance. On to you, Stefano.
Thank you so much, Eva, and welcome all. So let me share my screen since we're gonna. Okay, so I will speak a little bit, and then as anticipated, we will have a Q&A session at the end, but you will also be invited to participate throughout the session at specific points in time. So I will share more in a few minutes. So what really happened while I was working in the corporate world was that I came to the deep realization that for some reason, most organizations and teams at some point tend to generate dysfunctional patterns that hinder the possibility for people to be at their best. So I moved out from the corporate world, as I believe that so long as you are part of a system, it's hard to see your part in it, let alone your responsibility in co-creating some of the negative dynamics that occur. Let's say that you are blind to the system, and we can refer to this as system blindness, and the dynamic of the team. And this makes it very difficult to really change things from within. But if you move out of the system, whether that is a team or an organization, it becomes easier to see what really is going on and do something about it. You develop systemic awareness, and you can start doing something about it, and you can start to address the system dynamics. So this is what really team coaching is about, and we will talk more about systemic team coaching during the call. So of course, we don't have a huge amount of time. 30 minutes will fly. So the intention for today, just to set the expectations, is really to start introducing some key concepts about systemic team coaching, and also give you a sense of how a systemic team coach would operate to support the team. So let's talk about what systemic team coaching is then. Systemic team coaching is a powerful tool that looks at teams and as systems and helps them to address their dysfunctional patterns in real time while the team works on the business agenda. So there is this combination of interventions that the team coach does while the team is actually working on business. In essence, the team improves its results while restructuring and improving its dynamics. So this is a possible definition of systemic team coaching. Of course, you can have many definitions, but in its simplicity, I believe that this kind of includes most of the key words that we associate with systemic team coaching. Now, I want to do a little exercise with you, and I'm going to invite you to make first a reflection. I will share a few roles that I believe you have covered several times in your lives. Now, please read through these roles and select one with reference to a specific situation, better if work-related, otherwise life-related is okay, that didn't quite work out the way you were hoping. So a situation that didn't produce the expected results. Maybe the team underperformed, or you were a client in that situation and you were not happy. So here we go with the roles. So a possible role that you can think of is the role of what we call the team or project leader. And we refer to this role as somebody that has overall responsibility over a project or initiative. And this, again, can be a professional situation, or it can be a personal situation. Maybe you were in charge of organizing a vacation or whatever. And then there is a role, of course, of the team or project member. Every time there is a project leader or team leader, there is always at least one project or team member. And that is the person who has to work based on the team or project leader input. And then we have the role of a client. That can be internal client or external client. And basically that is who has to receive a service of a product. Now, take a few seconds to think about these roles, think about a situation where you were into one of these roles, and then we will open up the conversation. I'm going to give you a few seconds. All right. So I'm going to invite you now to step in one at a time, depending on the role that you cover. And there will be some specific questions that I will ask based on the role that you picked. So if you thought about a situation where you had the role of a team or project leader, the question for you is, how much responsibility did you feel on you and why? And this is when whoever picked that role that feels like sharing, please unmute yourself and share your answer to that question. How much responsibility did you feel on you and why in the role of team or project leader?
I can go. This is Erica. You know, I definitely felt responsibility a lot, because at the end of the day, you know, it's kind of me that needs to, you know, represent this in front of other people, in front of the client, or, you know, upper management. So that there's some pressure for that. Okay.
So a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibility, and you felt like you were the one that had to represent the team, okay, to the rest of the organization. Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's go to the second question. So in the role of a team and project member, what were your main assumptions about what the role of the team or project leader should be? So what were your expectations and assumptions? Anybody? Where you are in the role of the team member, what do you expect from a team leader?
Stefano, as an angel, can I jump in?
Absolutely, everybody can, yes.
My expectation would be that the team leader would have all the answers and give me straight instructions and directions.
Okay, so might we say that there is also an expectation that eventually the team leader is responsible for giving the answers, providing solutions? Okay, thank you, Eva. And Gianfranco, I see your hand raised.
Yes,
please jump
you.
in.
I was expecting clarity from the team leader in this example, bad example I have in mind, but clarity was not absolutely not there.
Okay, okay. So again, some answers, some clarity. So let's, there is another question actually that I wanted to ask in the role of the team member or team, let's say project member, but also in the role of the team leader. So this is really a question for all of you, except those that may be focused more on the role of a client. How were the most important decisions made in the team? Who was deciding? And this is also a general question. When you are in a team, in the role of a team leader or team member, how do you think decisions should be made? Anybody?
I would say, Stefano, I would say from the leader.
Why would you say that?
I was expecting, I mean, I personally expect that the leader gives a bit of his guidance and his knowledge and his focus on the main aspects, and then you will decide more on operational side.
Okay, thank you, Alessandro. So there's one more, of course, as you can expect, role, which is the role of the client. Again, that could be internal client, external client. What were your expectations that weren't met? So when you were a client, maybe you had expectations that weren't met. What kind of expectations did you have?
It's Silvio Savoia. I tried to give my answer. I choose this role. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay. I'm aware. Probably it's not completely appropriate to have this expectation, but my expectation was to be taken care of completely, not to have to put any effort in the endeavor, and it was my expectation.
Thank you, Silvio. Thank you, Silvio. So this is great, and thank you for stepping in to all of you who felt like sharing. And let's keep in mind what emerged in this first part of the session. So we started to share experiences in as we were covering the different roles. And again, I'm sure that we all been part of many situations where we were covering all these roles at some point in our lives. But it's very interesting to remember what you already shared, because what emerged from this short sharing are actually systemic conditions that generate specific patterns and influence how teams work all the time. Let me say that again. What you just shared are actually systemic conditions that generate patterns that influence how teams work all the time. And of course, I'm not referring to your specific situations, which you didn't even describe, because of course, those are yours and unique, but rather to the hidden systemic forces that very likely played out in the background of those specific situations. Now, let me be a little bit more explicit here and give you some examples. So the system in which we have this type of roles, leader, member, and client, which is basically any team in any organization, in fact, often trigger recognizable systemic patterns. So let me go a little deeper here. Systemic, since these roles are always in some way interconnected within the same system. So for example, we were talking about some experiences that you had as a team or project leader. And what we know about the systemic patterns generated when you are in that role is that whoever is a team or project leader needs to be in charge, needs to take on most of the responsibility. And if you think about what you were sharing earlier in the, thinking about your situation, I think it was Erica, and this is exactly what happened. You take on responsibilities, and what tends to happen often is that you end up feeling overload. And this is an organizational systemic pattern. It happens every time you are in that role. Then we had the role of the team or project member. And again, let's think about the sharing that you did a few minutes ago. The team member is, on the other hand, somebody that gives away responsibility, because of course you have the expectation that if there is somebody that takes responsibility is not yours. So what happens very often in this case is that people in these roles often feel disempowered and vulnerable. And again, this is another organizational systemic pattern. And it's amazing that what you shared is actually exactly what I'm sharing now, because it's occurring all the time. And then the other thing that we touched on is how decisions were made. And again, there was an expectations in this case that decisions should be made by the team leader. Sometimes it's not the team leader, sometimes it's the majority vote, but the bottom line here is that this is a process pattern. And it's again generated by the system. Then we also touched on the client role, and very interestingly, Silvio, what you said, you wanted to feel heard and cared for. And yeah, I mean, when we are clients, we always want to be listened to. We have needs, and we expect that our needs are met. So the expectation as a client is that I should get exactly what I need. And after all, since I'm the client, my expectations were very clear and hard to be met. So this is driven by another interesting systemic pattern where the client and the provider live in completely separate worlds instead of working in partnership. And it's amazing because what I'm sharing is happening all the time with the great regularity. I'm not saying that it's happening all the time, but I'm sure that most of you, as you listen to what I'm saying, have been in these roles many times and that experiences that are very close to what we are sharing. Now, however, as we were saying, as long as we are part of a system, we tend to be blind to these dynamics, to these patterns, and we tend to perpetuate behaviors that instead of optimizing team dynamics and results, end up limiting the ability of teams and of course, team members to express their full potential. That's not to say that, of course, things go wrong all the time, but there must be a reason why programs focused on team development, especially team coaching, have been significantly on the rise in the past 10 years or so. And it makes sense if you think about it, because the bar has been raised. We always expect higher performances and that the level of complexity has increased, and we all know, the type of challenges that we have to deal with when we're part of teams. Now, the good news is that when it's useful, it's possible to start seeing all these patterns and do something about it, and systemic team coaching can actually prove very useful. But as we were saying at the beginning of the presentation, in order to do that, often you need to move out of the system, because so long as you're part of the system, you're blind to it. So let's get to some key concepts about, and also something concrete about what a team coach, a systemic team coach can do in order to unveil these patterns and help teams to increase their level of performance, but also improve their effectiveness in terms of team dynamics. So a systemic team coach, being part of, let's say, out of the system, can observe the system while the team is working. So the team is the system in this case, on its business agenda, as we were saying, can see the patterns and help team members to become aware of them. So how do we do this as systemic team coaches? Well, we all know that when we are coaches, we ask a lot of questions, of course. So one question that we can possibly expect from a systemic team coach is a question that helps the team to frame the objectives that the team wants to achieve. So a possible question is how effectively you think you're working towards your objective. What is causing that? That is raising the level of awareness among team members about not only how effective the team is being, but also how clear objectives are. So we go back to the need of clarity about what has to happen there, what objectives need to be achieved. Another possible question is, and again, this is to raise the team's awareness about dynamics. What are you noticing in terms of how you're working, in terms of what is working and what isn't working, with reference to team dynamics. But we also know that one concept that we are trying to surface as a systemic team coach is the patterns. So this can be a straight question to the team. What are the patterns that you are observing here as you are working on the business agenda? Is it something that you notice that is recurring, that you've noticed many times in the way you're working? Most of the time, teams will be stuck in their patterns, don't see their patterns, but as soon as you invite them to step, let's say, to a different level of observation, they might start to actually see something that they were blind to until a few minutes before. Another possible question is, what is familiar to you in the way you're working that isn't helping? That is another way to help the team to surface patterns that may not serve the team with reference to their objectives or the results they need to achieve. Another possible question is, what do you need from each other in order to make progress? And again, this is a question that helps the team to reconstruct, restructure team dynamics and the way the different team members work together. And of course, as a team coach, we can also, based on the observation that we have, share what we noticed and provide direct feedback to the team. Of course, this comes as a second step, because what we really want to do is to help the system unblind itself, if that even makes sense in English, see things that was not possible to see before, and based on that increased level of awareness, decide how to differently deal with the work at hand. But of course, feedback can be very powerful, because not always the team can make the step, especially the very beginning. Some teams need to be helped in terms of developing the ability to see patterns, and some feedback can help in that sense. So let me stop here, because we really got nearly to the end of our time together. I knew that time was flying, but I want to make sure that we have a few minutes 5 minutes for Q&A. So whoever feels like asking a question, we have about 4 minutes for this now. So we have Paolo who raised. Paolo, yes, you are muted. If you can unmute yourself, please.
Right. I regularly forget to do this when I raise my hand. Excuse me. I wanted to offer an example which relates to a type of industry where I have worked as a coach for a long time. You raised the question of responsibility. Why is it that how are decisions made? And we stated that decisions are typically left to the team leader, and it's a matter of responsibility, because if anything goes wrong in a team member's thinking or usual way of thinking, it's going to be the team leader who will take responsibility on that and pay the consequences and whatever. And I wonder if there is any possibility that the team leader himself or herself is willing to retain that responsibility as a matter of individual power. Yeah. And I think that there needs to be, at least for us coaches, there needs to be some work done individually on the team leader and on the team members to really make this question of who is responsible for what clearer than it is, because responsibility in today's complex world can only be shared. Absolutely.
So thank you for that question. And yes, absolutely. There's always work that we can do on the team leader to together with the team in order to, let's say, create a different mindset about shared responsibility. However, since we're talking about systemic patterns here, what's important to remember is that every time we have somebody that is in the position of a team leader, there is this hidden force that pushes to take on responsibility. So let's say the automatic response of whoever is in that position is going to be take on responsibility, take away responsibility from others. So let's say that a systemic team coach can help team leaders and teams to surface this assumption, this pattern, but then there is work that has to happen both at team leader level and team level in order to create a different mindset and a different pattern, which goes more in the direction of distributed authority and responsibility. So it needs an intentional act. It's not happening spontaneously, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other question?
I think we have time for one quick question, if anybody has one.
I will go if I can, if I may. Stefano, do you think that you need to work with the leader one-on-one, or doesn't need? I mean, it's an entity, the team, and that's enough.
Yeah. So when you are, let's say, in the role of a team coach or systemic team coach, you look at the system, you work with the system. So the team leader is part of the system as any other team member. So you wouldn't, well, based on my experience, you wouldn't approach team leader and team members in a different way. So you work with the system, you work on the patterns of the system. Then there might be situations where, because of the role of the team leader is anyway a role that is very much impacting the dynamics of the team, there are situations where the team leader can also benefit from a parallel, let's say, development journey, in which case, depending on the specific situation, it might be appropriate that a different coach works with the team leader in order not to create situations where there is a breach of trust with the team or conflict of interest perceived. But I wouldn't say that this is recommended every time there is a team, to have both work with the team and with the team leader.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stefano. I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of everyone. That it was a very insightful session, and you showed us, I took note here, the hidden systemic conditions that generate patterns all the time within the team. Again, thank you very much. And we'll stop the recording now and